And that's it, we are live. Good afternoon to all of you. I'm Pete Marcroft, joined today by Jordan Smith for a new blog, tweet, chat, whatever you want to call it. This is where we're going to be doing our predictions for the upcoming 2014 Formula One season. As we all know, it is back. This weekend is coming up at Australia's Melbourne Albert Park. So this is where we are now. How are you doing, Jordan?
I'm fine, Pete. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. This season, of course, is completely changing. For those of you who aren't aware, the technical regulations are completely altered. We've now got ourselves V6 engines with turbochargers, loads of extra torque, much lower downforce, beam wings banned, blown diffusers banned, exhaust gases no longer near the diffusers allowed. There's all kinds of rules and regulations. And we've also seen some of the most butt-ugly F1 cars ever, thanks to the new regulations on the nose cones.
Agreed.
Absolutely horrible, aren't they? But needless to say, the whole point of this blog is this, well, I say this blog, it's more like a podcast, radio show, is all we want to do is get your comments and your opinions on the season. We're going to do one before the race begins, and also we're going to do one after the race. Possibly going to go out sometime live on Sunday, maybe Monday. Either way, we've got the race season coming up very, very shortly. So we want to look firstly at the challenge that's up to the drivers, with Albert Park itself being one of those circuits which is quite frustrating in many ways, being that it's part street circuit, part permanent track, which means that the grip levels are very inconsistent. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, it's a pretty tricky track to get used to, but to be honest, I think after years and years of all these drivers, besides the one that have just started out, you can easily get used to it. I'm pretty sure after about 10 laps of practice they can get the track out, unless it starts pouring down rain or something.
Well, speaking of all those people who are new to the sport or old to the sport, what we're going to do is look at the drivers and the team's chances going throughout the season. Now, we're going to go in reverse order for this due to the fact that we want to cover the little teams as much as the old teams. We want to be as balanced as possible here on my show. So starting off at the very bottom, according to last year's results, we've actually got Caterham, who for the first time found themselves at the foot of the grid, with Marussia overcoming them. So, they're going to have it all to do here. Their car's gone for a very radical front nose design in many ways. It's almost like a three-part wing. Very, very strange car in my opinion, but looking at the overall testing results for them, it doesn't look that promising, does it?
Well, about the car's looks, I think it's the most ugliest car out of the field, and usually Caterham is always a good-looking car when it went to the downstep nose thing for 2012 and 2013. But yeah, and during the tests, they have the best testing through pretty much for all the Renault engine cars, and I'm pretty sure you're gonna like the driver lineup for Caterham, which is one of your favourites that came back to Formula One.
That's very true, of course. The great Kamui-sama came back, Kamui Kobayashi. Now, interestingly, I saw an interview. I'm trying to get some excerpts of it, but unfortunately, I can't find it on the Autosport website. And it was an interview with Kamui Kobayashi where he said one of the ballsiest statements I've ever heard. And either he knows something we don't about the upcoming season, or he's extremely ambitious. Let me see if I can just find that. Unfortunately, I can't see it on the list. That's frustrating. Well, the reason that I'm talking is that they did a brief quote from the interview where he said, quote, "I'm with Caterham to win."
Well, Kobayashi, he's basically saying what every other F1 driver wants to say. They're not there to score a point, get a podium. They're there to win. They're there to be the best. And with Braun, everyone thought they were going to be the worst team in 2009, and they won the World Championships. You never know, Caterham could be up there, Australia.
It's possible, but judging by the pace in testing, they certainly seem to struggle. And this is really what makes this interesting is that Kamui came out and pretty much criticised Renault directly, saying that their engines were far too lacking in speed compared to the other cars, and it felt like almost a GP2 car could be quicker. So that's a massive about face from Kamui. Maybe there's some data from the factory of a Caterham that we're not privy to, but either way, to go from that kind of rock bottom, I've got no chance, all the way up to this is my greatest chance to get a title, why not?
You never know.
No, indeed not. Obviously he's been being partnered this year. We've seen his great craft in the past. So if anyone's going to carve his way through the field, we can certainly do it. 2010 at Suzuka being one of my favourite ones. But moving on to his partner, he's got, is it Marcus Ericsson as his driver for the season? All coming Swede from nowhere, replacing the much fancied Guido van der Garde, who found himself unfortunately out of a drive.
Well, about that, a few things about Marcus Ericsson, sorry. I saw him in GP2. He looked like a decent driver, you know. He was like one of those drivers that was just there. He was just quiet and he would just get the job done, really. He was like Jules Bianchi in some ways. But about the Guido van der Garde thing, I think what happened was van der Garde had an option to now stay at Caterham, or he could go with Sauber for a test drive, be a test driver, reserve driver, whatever it is. I'm pretty sure he just thought, I have a better chance if I can prove myself to this team that I'm quick and all that, so I think he went to Sauber.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that he did find himself out in that respect, but either way, Caterham's chances for me do not seem good. Apparently, according to many of the analysts who are in the test sessions at Jerez and at Bahrain, apparently their body is simply very conservative. So while it's not got the cooling issues that a lot of the other Renault runners have had, it's also not got the pace that the likes of the Mercedes runners have had. So it makes life very tricky for Caterham. They are playing catch-up, and to play catch-up early on in the season is never easy. They've still got a chance. Realistically, what would you say would their goal for the season be? Would it be to literally just beat the Marussias, or would you think a shock result would be part of their plan?
Well, ever since the end of 2010 and start of 2011, Lotus, or aka Caterham now, their goal has always been to become a midfield team and succeed, but they just never really managed to reach it due to money problems, the drivers, the car being unreliable or not fast enough, or not having the right luck. But this year they could finally score that point, but so can Marussia, because they've been looking pretty reliable as well and pretty good on the pace.
Yeah, moving on to Marussia then. They were the team that finished 10th in last season's championship. Critical for them to do that because of the extra boost it gives you with regards to costs and finances. Because when you've got that 10th place, you do get more money than if you're further behind the 8 ball. However, at the same time, they have going to be a bit crazy with their lineup. It took them a long time to confirm their driver lineup as Jules Bianchi and Max Chilton, which was one of the few teams on the grid to retain the same driver pairing this season. Needless to say, though, they've been given quite a few headlines in the test. Apparently, Jenson Button at one point said they look quick. Well, that's a bit of a surprise for someone who's in the McLaren, isn't it? Because when you've got the McLaren drivers pounding around putting in the laps they did, to have someone say your Marussia looks quick for the next season, that's got to be a feather in the cap for these drivers like Bianchi and also like Chilton, surely.
Yeah, it does look very good for Marussia, and for a driver like Jenson Button to say, wow, you guys look pretty quick, that is definitely a lot of encouragement for someone like Jules Bianchi and Max Chilton, especially for Max Chilton, because he probably, sees Jenson as like maybe a mentor in some way, or like an idol, because I'm not sure if he watched Jenson when he was younger in F1 or something like that, but still, like an elder British F1 driver telling you that your car has got pretty good pace for the next season, you must be really encouraged by that.
Well, no, it's nothing encouragement. Not only is he someone who you may have seen before, but you also have to remember that Jenson Button is a world champion. You can argue about whether he was someone who got it due to the car or not. That argument can run and run and run. The point is, this is a former world champion who's used to being at the back of the field. Don't forget, he drove for the 2001 Benetton, which is one of the worst cars ever. He also drove for the 2007 Honda, which is one of the worst cars ever. So he's someone who's experienced of being at the back of the grid and looking for that kind of pace. So to look at a kind of team who are traditionally at the back of the grid and say, actually, yeah, you guys look quick, that's definitely something that's going to give them quite a lot of encouragement, I'd expect. Max Chilton, though, moving on to him, it's like, we'll go on to him first rather than Bianchi. Purely because I've not really got much to say about Max Chilton. Yes, he set the record for the most drive in a season without actually retiring. In fact, it's the first driver to complete an entire season without retiring. But you got to admit that last season he was pretty much blown away by his teammate.
Yeah, but then compare Max Chilton to Bianchi. Bianchi's had a Ferrari Academy, and he's one hell of a talented driver. I think he's one of the prodigies of F1. He's going to be a future world champion one day. I call that. And Max Chilton, he just seems like the average driver gone because he got a little bit of money from the family, and he has that whole Chilton name because of the Euro touring cars and stuff. But still, it's like, in the first season, he did prove himself pretty well. He was consistent, very consistent with all of his finishes. He was consistent being last in qualifying, though, that is a fact. But still, he's gotten the job done, you know?
Indeed, and at least he's managed to keep the car on the road. It's always better to at least get to the end of a Grand Prix rather than to set the field ablaze. But judging by it, he really needs to step his pace up now that he's had that rookie season. A lot of people in the media will see that as a no more excuses watershed moment. And with so many other rookies on the grid this year as well, that throughout the entire field, you have to be aware that those guys will be looking to move up the pack along with the likes of Chilton and Bianchi. So definitely going to be a watershed year for the Englishman there, in my opinion.
Yeah, but we're just going to have to wait and see. I have a great feeling that Bianchi is going to be up there. If Jensen says the Marussia is going to be quick, then I expect Jules Bianchi to be up there, possibly in the midfield, even in Q3 maybe. We might see that in qualifying, but we won't know until it happens.
Indeed, well, one of the things that Marussia have got, courtesy of Bianchi, of course, is the reduced price engines from Ferrari. Now, pre-season, everyone was talking about how everyone expected Ferrari to be the one team who really struggled with the new regulations, purely because of the engines. Traditionally, Ferrari don't really do turbocharged ones. I think the Ferrari FF has one, the Ferrari F40 had one, but mainly you have to go back to the 1980s and even earlier for when they really traditionally make turbo engines, whereas Renault had them in their Clio and the rally cars. Mercedes have used them in the with partners Brabus and AMG. So they've definitely shown that they've got less nous. But, surprise, they've been the one manufacturer to consistently get the mileage on their engines alongside Mercedes. Renault, on the other hand, have really struggled. So in the battle between Caterham and Marussia in the early rounds, Marussia have definitely got reliability on their side. And Caterham will be playing a little catch-up on that. But then again, Caterham did also show that their engine and their cooling isn't as bad, so it might be enough to get them to the front. Going back to Bianchi though, last season many times he really drove the wheels off his Marussia, did everything possible to be able to get to good results for the team. Do you expect that to continue in him to go even further?
Yeah, I expect him. If the car is as good as Jensen says, then I expect Jules to score a point at some point, get into Q2 a few times, possibly be in the midfield for all we know. Caterham and Marussia, that battle can go from like the back of the field to possibly the midfield. So you could see Marussia versus Caterham. Like instead of who's going to get the higher position that's closest to points, instead it'll be who's got the most points out of the two.
Indeed. Well, moving further on then, we'll go to the 9th place team from last season, Fallen Giants Williams. Williams Renault last season had, quite frankly, one of their worst seasons in many years, ending with just 5 points, where both Valtteri Bottas and also Pastor Maldonado brought home the bacon to get them some points. And aside from the races at America and Brazil for Valtteri Bottas, and also the Canadian Grand Prix where he put it third on the grid thanks to a wet setup, Williams will remember 2013 as one of their worst seasons. But this season itself, switched their engine plants, gone from Renault to Mercedes. They certainly seem to have dodged a bullet on that front. And as far as the pace in the car goes, they've probably been the dark horse of testing so far and really lit the timing screens out of nowhere.
Yeah, I'm really happy to see Williams, getting back up there again. And it's great to see a change in the driver lineup. We have the young Valtteri Bottas there, and then we have the experienced Felipe Massa. I'm pretty sure they're going to be a pretty strong driver lineup. And I'm glad that certain driver's out of that team, but then he's in another team, but they're really bad now, so I'm happy about that.
Well, we'll get on to that other team and other driver later. We're going on to Felipe Massa. I mean, many people expected him to retire from the sport. Once it was confirmed that Kimi Raikkonen was going back to Ferrari and that Fernando Alonso was obviously still going to stay with the team despite their public falling out to an extent, for him to go to Williams, people were expecting it to be similar to Rubens Barrichello, who showed flashes of pace but was pretty much out of his time. But again, in testing so far, Massa's proven that he's still got it. He did actually come top of the session at Bahrain a couple of times. But then again, you have to be wary with Williams and testing pace. 2009, Nico Rosberg set loads of fastest times in testing and free practice, and in the races just never got anywhere near that promise. And analysts will be fearing that it could still be another false storm for Williams.
Yeah, but in 2009, there was two things. One, they had a crappy driver lineup, not from Nico Rosberg, from Nakajima, because he was never consistent, never good.
And never scored points.
And Rosberg, whenever he was getting in a good position to score points or possibly even get a win, the car was unreliable or he made a mistake.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking obviously there about Singapore when he made the fateful error of crossing the white line and going from strong second possible win all the way to the foot of the field.
Yeah. It's a shame as well.
A big shame, but Felipe Massa now must obviously be very buoyant and confident after what was a very strong season for Ferrari in 2013, after a pretty dismal one in 2012. All of a sudden he moves himself up there and does really well the following year. And moving to Williams, where he's got his great friend Rod Smedley, no longer his race engineer, but has engineering staff, and also Pat Simmons, former Renault team boss there as well. He's really got quite a lot of seasoned people around him, along with his own seasoned experience. Would you rule out the possibility of podiums or even a win for Felipe Massa?
I could see a win for Felipe Massa and Bottas. I can see podiums for Massa and Bottas. I can see possibly 1-2s. Because Williams, they're looking really, really strong for this season.
Going back to Valtteri Bottas, I mean, he's proven last season just how good he was. You always hear someone like Frank Williams, they always say, oh, they're naturally born to drive a car. And then some of them flourish, like Kimi Räikkönen flourished, Jenson Button flourished. But then there's a few others, you look at them and you just like Heinz-Harald Frentzen, for instance, aside from his 99 season with Jordan, didn't really have the highlights. And but so far Bottas has proven he's definitely got that innate skill.
Yeah, Bottas has that natural. I don't know what it is about Finnish F1 drivers, but they just seem to have the natural instinct of a racer. They always seem to magically get their pace, except from Kovalainen, but every other Finnish driver, they've always seemed to randomly get talent out of nowhere.
Well, there's that old phrase, isn't there? If you want to win, employ a Finn. And, well, you can roll them off your tongue, can't you? Hakkinen, Räikkönen. There's many out there. Bottas, then you're going further back. You've got Keke Rosberg. You've got many out there historically. Definitely one of the nations who produced the drivers. So Williams definitely looking stronger. Now Toro Rosso, they're going to be in a very unusual scenario this season because they've switched from Ferrari plants to Renault as part of unifying their relationship with Red Bull. Though I did see a very interesting article courtesy of the forum F1 Rejects, which one of their users linked to, on I think it was Auto Crash or AutoNet something, and it was where Red Bull were quoted as saying they were asking Toro Rosso for help with their wireless braking system. What do you make of that?
I find it pretty funny, to be honest, because we have Red Bull. It's like an internationally famous team now for pretty much nearly every sport. I don't know, the snowboarding stuff, the BMXing stuff, any kind of extreme sport or motorsport. There always seems to be something Red Bull in it that's super famous and stuff. Then Red Bull, the championship team, it's been dominating for 4 seasons, sorry. And then they're slower than Toro Rosso, and they're asking them for help.
Well, I think we'll get on to Red Bull's chances later on in this podcast. But I do think it's funny that they have actually gone to Toro Rosso for help. It did raise a few questions on the F1 Rejects website with people saying, what are the rules in regards to sharing data? Now, to my understanding, teams are allowed to have technical relationship with others. I know that McLaren have theirs with Force India, and they did have one with Marussia, but I don't know if that's come under threat thanks to the Ferrari engines. I'm not sure what's going on there. But they definitely have it with Force India. And I know also that Ferrari have obviously had that link with Sauber in the past. I mean, look at the drivers who've gone there. Massa, Räikkönen, all come from Sauber, and you'd probably expect Bianchi to be moving on there at some point. Perez possibly would have gone to Ferrari if he'd not made his move to Sauber, to McLaren prematurely. So you definitely see the Ferrari linking the lower teams happening around. But Toro Rosso this season, one of the things about them is that, like many of the other Renault-powered cars, you don't really know what to read at the pace. I mean, Jean-Eric Vergne, I think he managed to get something like 18 yards out the pit lane at one point at Jerez before his car gave up the coast. That's going to put you on the back foot, surely.
Yeah, Toro Rosso, they like, even though they did manage to go faster in Red Bull in a lot of sessions and be more reliable, it's still looking bad for them as well, purely because of that Renault engine's being unreliable. They're going to be kicking themselves because they wish they could have kept that Ferrari engine.
I mean, they do have James Key developing their car, Toro Rosso, so they're a team who've got a very talented designer. James Key, of course, helped Force India punch above the weight in the mid-2000s. He got that Sauber, particularly in the hands of Kumari Kobayashi, really delivering the results in 2010. So he's definitely got a lot of talent in there, James Key, and definitely he's got a decent driver lineup at Toro Rosso. John-Eric Verne, though, for me, I believe this is pretty much last chance saloon for him. Against Daniel Ricciardo, he seemed to lack a lot of pace in qualifying, but then on race pace seemed quite reliable. Do you reckon this season he's got to make that big step up though because of his rookie teammate?
This happens with a lot of drivers where a big team's looking for a seat, and then the guy's teammate goes, and he's thinking, right, I've got to step up my game, and then next thing you know, he ends up sticking around the midfield for a long time. I think Jean-Eric Verne is going to be, you know the Rockers with Shawn Michaels and Murray Janae. It's going to be like that. One of them's going to rise up and be famous and stuff, and the other one's just going to be a jobber.
For those of you guys watching on the stream there, to bring WWE into the F1, that's a bit of a crazy leap of imagination. This vlog is not actually about playing the game. We've just got the backdrop of F1 2013, and we are talking about the upcoming 2014 season. John Verne, for me, he's a driver who has shown his promise and he can do good results, but he really needs that push in qualifying, and he needs to take charge of Toro Rosso. He is now under threat from Daniil Kvyat, the Russian who went from GP3 straight to Formula 1, bypassing the likes of Carlos Sainz Jr. and many of the other Red Bull drivers who are in GP2, showing that either Red Bull think he's an ace in the hole or they're lacking confidence in their junior program. And let's not forget, aside from Sebastian Vettel and now Daniel Ricciardo, there are many ex-Red Bull junior drivers who've never got their chance. And someone like Jean-Eric Verne has really got to make sure he's not upstaged by Daniil Kvyat.
Yeah, to be honest, I'm not trying to be harsh, but I think Jean-Eric Verne's going to join that crew of Jaime Alguersuari, Sebastian Buemi, Sebastian Bourdais, who else? Antonio Liuzzi, Scott Speed. Yeah. All those people, I think he's going to join that group of Toro Rosso drivers that never got anywhere.
And that's one of the things you've got to be able to take your chances and be able to move forward. So for Daniil Kvyat, he's obviously eyeing up his teammate. He's saying, Ricciardo had you beat. I want to follow Ricciardo's example. Obviously, there's no immediate ascension to Red Bull available because of the lineup at Red Bull itself, but 2016 onwards, anything's possible. So for someone like Daniil Kvyat, who's got the new regulations reset from zero as his first entry into Formula 1, he's definitely got a chance of a few outside surprising results, I'd say.
Yeah, I'm really excited for Daniil Kvyat. He's a very talented driver who I've seen in GP3 in his championship-winning race at Abu Dhabi in GP3. Absolutely dominated the race. No one got near him. Clearly dominated that race. In practice, he looked pretty promising in that 2013 Toro Rosso.
So it's definitely a great chance for him to move up the field, or at least put a marker on to say, I'm here, take me seriously. So, well, we talked about James Key, going on to the sixth team, the team he formerly developed for, seventh team, James Key. Sauber Ferrari came seventh overall last season. You have to say that most of the donkey work then was done by the great Nico Hülkenberg. And Sauber now find themselves with a new lineup, and in a bizarre switch, Adrian Sutil comes to the team. What's your opinion on that? Because, I mean, he's always been one of those drivers who is very, very anonymous. You never really see him doing anything. I know that he had that fight in China a few years ago, but other than that, unless it's Monaco, he doesn't really seem to star anywhere.
He actually has starred in a lot of races, mainly around 2009 and 2010. That's when he had his prime times, you know. Like in 2009, he was in Monza. He started second on the grid, and he fought against the likes of Jenson Button and Rubens Barrichello, not Felipe Massa, he wasn't there, Kimi Raikkonen, Lewis Hamilton, etc. In 2010, he fought with Vettel, Kubica, and all that quite often. He was consistently in the top 10 and trashed his teammate Antonio Liuzzi. But you're right, Sutil is like an anonymous driver, and for me, he seems one of those guys that was just going to stay in that one team for ages and ages and never leave it, but he's left the team he's so comfortable in, known as Force India, or Midland, or Jordan, whatever you want to call it, but
Be a real rebel, call him Spiker.
Or Spiker, yeah, Spiker, I'm sorry. But all those teams, basically, they're all Force India, and he's been sticking around it ever since he started his career, and he's finally moved to another team. It's Sauber.
I mean,
he's the experienced driver.
The thing is, though, going by the fact that he's the experienced driver, in pre-season testing, he was the one that had the accidents. He was the one who was crashing the car out. So that's not the greatest start to your relationship there. And Suchel's got to pick up the pieces and be able to try and deliver some of his new drives. He has, however, got a decent barometer in Esteban Gutierrez. Now, let's not forget, it was Gutierrez who rammed him up the rear end in China last season. I'm pretty sure there'll be firm words in the garage to try and avoid that again.
Yeah, but I'm pretty sure there's no hard feelings about that. I mean, Suto was like 9th or something, and Gutierrez was only like 11th, but he almost hit someone else as well. But so it was only like maybe 1 or 2 points that were almost lost. But Gutierrez, in 2013, I was not impressed by him. I'm sorry.
No.
I was just not impressed by Gutierrez at all. Besides that 7th place finish, he didn't really prove himself anything. I mean, where Hulkenberg was still doing well when the car was crap, Gutierrez was sitting like 17th or something all the time. And then when the car got better...
looking at Gutierrez's results, his results for the season are shocking. He only got 1 points finish, whereas Nico Hulkenberg got something like 10. Now, if you actually look at his result as well, it was like 13th, 12th, retired, 18th, 11th, 13th, 20th, 14th, 14th, retired, 14th, 13th, 12th, 11th. Then his points finish is 7th place, then 15th, 13th, 13th, and 12th. So that kind of consistency outside the points is really not what he needed. When talking about Nico Hulkenberg, he almost stuck on the podium at Korea. He followed that up with an excellent performance in 6th place. He just kept that car punching way above its weight. And the team, I'm amazed they even kept Gutierrez on. Obviously, to me, he's just there for his money, because there's so many other drivers who haven't got seats this season. You know, people who were in negotiations with the likes of Force India, such as Jaime Alguersuari, have all been overlooked instead for Esteban Gutierrez. And, well, obviously, he's had a season with the team and knows the mechanics, but he's had a pretty poor season when you think about it.
Yeah, pretty much. Gutierrez, paid driver. He's only there because Perez left and they needed that Mexican money again, so they got Gutierrez in.
Well, it'll be interesting to see if he can improve with Subaru as his barometer, but Sauber have looked a bit out of shape of late in testing because they've been struggling a lot with their grit levels. Really found it hard to get the power down, apparently, and have often been going off the track with many excursions. So, there again, a team that are behind the 8 ball, and last season showed that they can turn a bad car around. Question is just how bad is it?
God knows, really. We're going to have to wait until practice comes up, really.
Yeah, indeed. Well, moving on then, we've got Force India now. They have a partnership in their team, which surely is one of the most exciting driver lineups on the grid. We talked about the Nico Hulkenberg, aforementioned, really punched above his weight. Many people expected him to be driving for the likes of Lotus, possibly even Ferrari, but Norvale is extending up with at Force India. But he's also partnered by Sergio Perez, who I believe was very cruelly treated by McLaren last season. Yeah, he wasn't brilliant, but neither was the car. And even Jenson Button, despite starring at Brazil and earlier on at China, even he struggled really hard as well. So I thought it was really unfair for them to dump Perez the way they did. And so far in testing, both Hulkenberg and Perez have really dropped that Force India into very high positions. You can say that might be a lot to do with the Mercedes engine, but engine isn't the only part of the car, and those guys certainly seem pretty confident.
Yeah, both drivers, they can easily punch above their weight when they're in, the right setup, the right car, the right time in the race, the right strategy and all that stuff. Hulkenberg is the king of punching above his weight, and Perez, he just uses his natural speed to solve his problems, really, and it's really, especially his tire strategies, that seems to be one of his key points, his tire strategies. You mainly see that at Malaysia, Monza, where Monza he pitted for, I think it was the prime tire, and then Wade went slow for a while, then started pushing the car like crazy, and ended up overtaking Massa and Alonso super quickly, and he was catching Hamilton.
Yeah, it just shows that tyre strategy as well with this season, with them being harder and therefore a little bit slower, that kind of driving can make a massive, massive difference. So it'll be interesting to see just how that car delivers. The Force India does have, I must say, one of the most annoying front noses in the world. It literally looks like they put a strap on the end of the car and painted it black. It really is not aesthetically pleasing. But they've always said sometimes you have to go ugly to win. Ferrari has certainly taken that to extremes this season, so who knows, it might well be a winning package. But before Cindy, I'd definitely be backing them to be regular points finishes, and I wouldn't be surprised if they're aiming for podiums as well. They've always been a team that have been just on the cusp of being on the podium, and they never quite got there, aside from fluke results like a Spa in 2009, where they had the car on the right conditions. I think really this is the season where they need to be consistently aiming for podiums, get a handful, 3 or 4, just to get that extra push in for 2015.
Yeah, pretty much.
Well, let's move on then to fallen giants McLaren, who finished 5th last season, their worst season for pretty much 30 years. They finished off the podium for the first time since the mid-1990s, and they really toiled. Their best result being 4th at Interlagos, and then the only other results of note were 5th at New Delhi and 5th at Shanghai. Otherwise, it was scrappy performances of points, where Perez and Button coming together in the Monaco, and then Perez pretty much riding off Raikkonen's car in Monaco. Needless to say, a season for them to forget. Now, this season, Jenson Button's back for another campaign with them, and many will be questioning just how competitive the McLaren are going to be, because next season they leave Mercedes and go to Honda in terms of their engine partnership. So that's where they could potentially be at a disadvantage in the later rounds at places like Spa, places like Singapore, and places like Abu Dhabi. They may really struggle by being given the most basic package available from Mercedes, whereas the likes of the factory team and Force India will definitely have the best cards on the table. But for me, Jenson Button, he said that the car has not got any of the gremlins that last year's car had, and the confidence about developing it. Surely that's got to be able to get some momentum for getting forward.
Well, from what Jenson Button said about the car, it just sounds like it's an average car. But then when you look at the test results in Jerez and Bahrain, the car's been looking pretty strong and consistent. Kevin Magnussen's been looking really consistent pace-wise. Jenson Button's been really good on the long runs, doing like nearly over 100 laps in every session. That's Jenson Button for you, like the king of testing and all that, and like car data and stuff.
And of course, Kevin Magnussen, all eyes are on him because everyone's saying how can a rookie go straight to McLaren? But then you just mentioned 2 words to them, Lewis Hamilton. So, the Dane has got a great chance. He's also the first driver to drive for McLaren who's the son of a former driver in quite some time. Even though Jan Magnussen only raced once for them, that's not the point. Stats are stats. On the stream, Hans31101998 says hello. Good afternoon to you. We're just going through our predictions for the upcoming 2014 race. If you've got any comments that you want to get through, please feel happy to add them on there. We'll be more than able to get through those. Going back to Kevin Magnussen, he's definitely got the pace from what we've seen in the pre-season testing, and he's got plenty of chances. The question is, how much time is he going to need to be able to break into that car, or is he going to be someone who's going to be quick off his feet straight away?
He seems like he's going to be quick off his feet straight away, but if that's not the case, I expect him to pick up the pace round about Bahrain.
And also, McLaren have also restructured the team because Martin Whitmarsh, the former team principal, has been pretty much MIA. No one knows where he is. Apparently he's still got some kind of role in the company, but there's been no comments from him. And the new CEO, Ron Dennis, has also said very little. One big coup they've got, though, is that they have got Eric Boulier, the former team principal at Lotus. Now, he's not actually the team principal. He's something like, I think it's like the management director is his title or something. For me, that pretty much says team principal. principle. And one of the things that Jenson Button said is that a Boulier will bring stability. So is that an outward criticism for Jenson Button that maybe last season the team just lacked that inner runnings and guidance in order to be able to get that car turned around to be a success?
God knows, really.
Well, either way, McLaren have really got to pull the socks up this year. And one of the big questions about McLaren is the fact that they've not yet confirmed who their major sponsor is going to be. They lost Vodafone, a huge telecommunications partner. Now, there's heavy rumours that they might be getting Sony on board because Sony do a lot of the electronics on Honda road cars. And they apparently have one to announce in the coming weeks. But it's not going to be released at Australia. Apparently we're not going to see it break cover till Malaysia. That's the first for quite some time for a front-running team, surely.
Yeah, it's going to kind of look weird for a car that says MP429 or whatever it is going about, but McLaren, usually they're a big team, so you would think they have a massive sponsor already, but no, they don't. And Sony, it's understandable because of the whole Honda thing coming in next year. And you got a driver that's really popular in Japan. McLaren's already popular in Japan by itself. You got the Honda engines, and then you get the Japanese sponsor, basically making a Japanese patriotic team there.
Potentially, definitely. But McLaren have really got to seize the chance here and really hit the ground running. With the Mercedes power plant in the back, they are going to have the advantage on the Renault teams in that front, but again, we don't know what surprises they're going to bring. So on to the fourth place finish team from last year, that is Lotus. And boy, have they been causing ripples of controversy. First of all, we've got their very striking front nose for their car, which has got that almost like a mammoth tusk in many ways, where you've got the split nose at the front, with one being slightly longer than the other to make it legal. Car looks quite radical, but also does not look reliable.
To be honest, I think the car looks really nice. It's a really nice looking car. The front nose, even though it's kind of that awkward one side's longer than the other, I still really like how it looks. I like the paint, because that's like my favourite combination of colours. The kind of like creamish white kind of colour, then you have the red and the black with it. That's a really good mix of colours that I really like. But there is one problem that I have, and that is the driver lineup.
Yeah, I mean, we'll talk about the good and the first before the bad. The good is that now Romain Grosjean moves his way up to team leader. Now, for a driver who was so badly vilified in 2012, including getting suspended from a race due to his actions at Spa, he's really done one of the form turnarounds of the decade in many ways, because last season he was strong. He was very quick on the overall pace. He certainly caught Vettel and Webber napping at Japan at Suzuka, where he was possibly an outside chance to take victory, and really showed that taking the right advice and taking it a little bit easier, you can unlock that raw pace into race-winning potential. And in terms of having that natural talent, he's now delivering on it. Do you expect this season to be one where he finally breaks his duck and gets to the top of the step of the podium?
Not really, purely because of the car he's driving. It seems to be really unreliable and useless. And they said they're not even ready. Everyone from Lotus is basically saying they won't be surprised if they don't even finish the race at Australia.
That's the kind of preparation you don't want to be hearing from the teams, really. And it does have quite a few people worried that this season could almost be like the difference between LMP1 and LMP2 at Le Mans, where pure power of the cars is a massive deciding factor. So it's going to be a tricky thing for Lotus. And they've also got the headache of Pastor Maldonado and Grosjean in the same team. Pastor Maldonado certainly earned his critics last season with the way he was very vocal and derisive about the Williams team.
Maldonado.
Come on, we need to hear your opinion here, Jordan. What have you got to say?
This guy is a piece of shit. I think he is the most pathetic F1 driver of the 21st century, and he's a whining little bitch that does not appreciate anything he was given, and he's like, I've got my money, you guys don't deserve any of it, because We get one bad season. Like, Valtteri Bottas, a much younger and less experienced driver, he just sat there, got his head down, got the job done. And when he was being all successful, man was like, conspiracy, everything's against me. He's a whining little bitch. It shouldn't even got that scene. I'm glad Lotus are doing shit now because he's driving for them.
Ouch. Well, you've heard Jordan's comments there. I will say that the pay driver thing is one of the issues with Maldonado. He does seem to be a driver who's there for his money. You can't take away from him that excellent win that he had at Barcelona in 2012. That's not possible to take away from him. But the problem is that he certainly seems to have just... Well, after the 2012 car was so good and consistent, Williams make a bad car, and he's just thrown his toys straight out of the pram. It's gone straight to his head, and now, of course, because he's got $30 million, he's gone to Lotus. You know, what's going to happen if Grosjean starts beating him? Oh, you're being favoured because he's been with you for so long, and all this kind of stuff. Maldonado really, next season, has to knuckle down, get his head down, and do some work. And I'm not sure if he's going to be able to shoulder the house. But then again, if Grosjean can turn around from being so vilified, so can Maldonado.
No. And I'm sorry, Grosjean I could believe in, Maldonado no. He is just terrible. The only time I would support him is that whole 2012 Williams win thing. I will give him credit for that. He did earn that win, but besides that, I think he's a piece of shit.
Well, before we get ourselves surrounded in diatribes, we'll move on to the third place team from last season, and that is the factory Ferrari team. Now, they've got potentially the strongest lineup in terms of now's maturity and skill, in that Fernando Alonso and Kimi Räikkönen are both driving together at the Ferrari. That's 3 world championships between them. That's a team who really failed to deliver. Now, Fernando Alonso will need to be said about his skills. He proved in 2012, he proved in 2013 that he's got the ability to drag results out of cars which really don't deserve it. And also, we've seen in the past that his championship runs in 2005, 2006, he's got the skill. But Kimi Räikkönen, the team driver who was paid by Ferrari for 2 seasons to not even race, has been brought back into the fold. Surely that's going to cause some disparity between the garage members, that.
It might be a little bit awkward. I think it'll be more awkward between Raikkonen and Alonso, purely because, like, they've been fighting for the championship for a long time against each other. I mean, like, 2005, they fought against each other, 2006, 2007, 2008, 2009, they just kind of, like, fought about the midfield. 2012, they were fighting for podiums and race wins. They've always been fighting against each other whenever they were in F1. And now they're in the same team, but combined they're both experience and hopefully maturity from both of them. Hopefully we don't see Fernando go bitchy again. But just, like, hopefully those two can work together, because I really like Kimi Räikkönen. I really like Alonso. I think that Alonso's really matured. He's gotten his head together ever since, 2007, where he was always like, rookies beating me. Yeah. But, I think he's really matured over the years. I'm glad to see that, and I hope those two become a very strong force in Australia. Hopefully we can see them on the podium, possibly at 1-2. I just hope they do good.
Well, talking about the driver lineup, in Ferrari itself, they've certainly surprised people with their engine package. Many people were expecting that to be really down on power and really lacking the ability to get results. But so far in the test, they've done a hell of a lot more mileage than the Renault teams. And that's going to give them a lot of confidence heading forward into the few upcoming races ahead. Now, the Ferrari, of course, has attracted attention basically because it's got a Dyson vacuum cleaner on the front of it. It looks horrific. It's like you look at the side of the car and you think, gorgeous, gorgeous, and then you get to run and you go, kill it with fire. It looks absolutely horrible. It really does.
Yeah, pretty much. To be honest, I think the best looking cars, like, I've got 3 of my favourites. One of them is the Marussia, the other one's the Williams, and the other one's the McLaren.
Interesting choices. But we did say before, looks don't win your races. It's your skills to be able to point your results on the track and to develop a race car. So Ferrari has shown they can do that in the past. Who knows? Maybe it will happen this time. Ferrari, though, outsiders, I believe, in terms of the championship, purely because so far it seems the Mercedes power plant is the one with the reliability and the one with the power. But that is not the be-all and the end-all. Not by a long shot.
Yeah, but Mercedes have been working on this engine since, like, 2012. That's why Hamilton was on board with them, he was in talks with them before mid-2012, purely because they told him about the whole Mercedes plan for 2014, and Hamilton was like, damn, if that's what's actually going to happen, I'm on board with that.
Yeah, exactly, and that gives him a great chance to be able to have the car under him. So we'll move on from Ferrari, and since we talked about Hamilton, I guess it's a segue into the second team, Mercedes last season. Well, if anyone was surprised that they had the car last season, it happened all across the field, because that team had a pretty shocking 2012, finishing 6th place. Bear in mind, McLaren finished 5th last season, and everyone's calling it their worst season in a long time. Mercedes certainly disappointed.
Actually, in 2012, they finished 5th. They just managed to stay ahead of Sauber.
Oh, right, okay, I got that wrong. So Neil say 5th place in the field, though, definitely not where they wanted to be. And McLaren showed that you can fall from grace. Mercedes has shown you can bounce back with their performances last season. Both Nico Rosberg and Lewis Hamilton definitely got the best out of that car. Now, this season in pre-season testing, they've certainly looked like the form team. They've had the condition all across the car, they've had performance in all conditions, and the engine, all the data they've got from McLaren, from Williams, Force India, and from themselves is going to give them a phenomenal advantage, surely.
Yeah, the engine, basically, the car looks good. The engine's good. Just everything. They got a good driver lineup. They've just basically got everything good in that team. Everything seems to be going their way for this season, and hopefully we can see them at the top spot of the podium quite often.
Yeah, it'd be nice to see, definitely. I mean, the question is whether it's going to be like the McLaren season in 1988, when we saw them dominate all but one race.
Nah, I don't think it'll be that dominant, because they're most likely going to break down at least one race. I can't see anyone not having an engine failure once in the whole entire season. It'll be impossible, because it's the first season of brand new engines. Because when the V8 engines came around in 2006, there was engine failures left, right, and centre, mainly with BMW Sauber. But still, it's just
Well, it's interesting you should talk about the engines, actually, because one of the big things about it now is you're actually only allowed 5 engines for the whole season before you start incurring penalties. Last season, that was 8. So that's a big difference now, because we've got a 19-race calendar, and therefore you're looking at between 3 and 4 full race distances in terms of outright racing. But that also includes practices, qualifying for the whole season. I don't know what the rules are for in-season testing, but needless to say, that's a lot of mileage you need to put on those engines, and that's not going to be easy.
Yeah, pretty much.
And I say, going on the Mercedes driver ladder then, who do you reckon is going to have the aces over the whole season? Do you see it being Nico Rosberg, who's had the car and the team around him since 2010? Or do you expect it to be Hamilton, who's now had time to invest in that car and possibly get it developed more to his liking?
I am thinking Rosberg, because in 2013 he actually got a bit more wins than Hamilton and more poles than Hamilton, actually. But then Hamilton, he just has that natural gift to get raw pace out of nowhere whenever he wants, really. And he beat Nico Rosberg in 2013. That was his first time in the team. They both know each other really well, but still, in the end, I think this is possibly the second or the most strongest driver pairing in the 2014 season.
Yeah, definitely. And I said, talking about Hamilton's natural speed, we've seen that before. He's quite tail-happy, he's quite aggressive. He obviously takes after the air-to-centre approach and throw it around the track rather than being more like Jacques Stewart or Alan Prost, thinking that you need to really take your time to develop your result. And again, though, the key difference is last season, Hamilton will have had no say in the design of that car, because that car was developed in 2012. When he was driving for McLaren. This season's car was developed last year, Mercedes obviously wanted his input. That's why they brought the bank to get him in the team, replacing Michael Schumacher with him. Let's not forget that as well. So him being able to develop that car around him a little bit more as well could see the balance being swung in his favour. We saw at McLaren, for instance, I think it was in 2012 or 2011, I think it was 2012, where the car was changed mid-season and Jenson Button found it much more difficult because it was more like Hamilton's driving style. If that kind of thing happens between him and Rosberg, who knows who's going to come out on top?
God knows, really.
Well, moving on then, finally, to the Red Bull team. We did briefly talk about them before because of what they did with Toro Rosso, basically asking them for help with regards how to use the brake-by-wire technology. So, well, last season's Red Bull results speak for themselves. They got 12 victories, all of them to one man, who stole one from Mark Webber in Malaysia, of course. They dominated the championship. They finished nearly 150 points in front. They got 596 points. Mercedes 360. They finished so far ahead of the pack it was beyond belief. Now that's nearly 250. They got on 150 points, Gulf. They absolutely slaughtered the field last year. So who could be more surprised than anyone else at their toils that they've had off track in pre-season testing? Because they've really had to work hard in that car.
I'm pretty sure Vettel, aka Blonde Boy Bitchhead, has definitely been very badly surprised. And Ricardo, he's probably thinking, oh, for God's sake, I finally get into a big championship team and this happens.
And you also have to ask the question as to what is actually causing the issue. Cooling is the big problem. Now, we know that Adrian Newey is one of the kings of aerodynamics. He really likes a car that's tightly packaged, efficient aerodynamically, gain the speed in the corners. However, that does mean that if you've got an engine block which needs a lot of heat, you've got the new electronic recovery systems with miles more electric energy recovered, there's a lot more heat going through the car, a lot more weight. It's not so easy to package it tightly. And if it's packaged that car so tightly it's really going to make things difficult, then who knows? I mean, there's actually been some theories that the last couple of tests for Red Bull, their car might not have even been legal. Now, before we get some protests about that, you can actually race a car that's outside the regulations in testing, but you're not allowed to do it in racing. Most teams choose not to do it because there's no point getting any data if the car's going to fail scrutineering. But if it's true, I'm not surprised Red Bull have done it, purely because they needed to get some miles on the car. They needed their electronics testing, they needed the gearbox testing, they certainly need to do something with the engine. So there's rumours that they've been drilling holes in the car in places you're not allowed to, just to get extra cooling. Again, this is all circumstantial evidence, no one in the team's confirmed it, but if they've had some results of that, that puts them in a very bad position indeed.
Yeah, pretty much, and for Daniel Ricciardo, I really feel sorry for this guy. I'm not sure Red Bull will be a bad team. They might, for all we know, they could start dominating again, but this is basically a Sergio Perez. He proves himself very well in his midfield team. He gets invited into this big team, and then they just go bad.
Well, I mean, we are speaking based off pre-season testing here. That's never the be-all and end-all of a season. And also, worrying with the other teams, Jenson Button still believes that car has got mighty pace in it. Because he was saying at Jerez that while they weren't running around at high speed because of the engine issues, at one point Daniel Ricciardo overtook him at turn 11, and he's never seen a car do that. That's how confident the driver was in driving the car. So if Red Bull have got a bad car under them for this season, if they can unlock all the demons and get the pace out of that car, who knows, it could just be another 2013 again. That's ominous signs for the other teams.
Yeah, pretty much, but still, that's just from pre-season testing, so we won't know until we get to practice, race, or qualifying. Depends, really.
That's exactly it. And of course, the relationship between Ricciardo and Vettel is going to be the interesting one. Last season, we did see the great Aussie grit himself, Mark Webber, who pretty much fell out with Vettel at the second race. Like, I remember his legendary quote, "Multi 21, Sip." Multi 21, which is basically like, what are you doing, you idiots? So that was the last thing he needed. Of course, Webber this season's going to drive World Endurance cars, driving for Porsche in their return to Le Mans Prototype 1 class. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of garage environment there is now that Webber's gone. but another Aussie's replaced him. Is Ricciardo going to be a no-nonsense approach like Webber and Alan Jones were, or is he going to be a bit more compliant?
Ricciardo seems like a compliant guy, but even though they did a little interview where Ricciardo did hint at Bell on a few things, like Bell asked him a question saying, "Can you be mean?" Or he's like, "No, are you mean?" And he says, "Well, I can be." And then another one was like, how do you, like Ricciardo asked a question of Bell from someone from Twitter saying, "Do you feel older now? There's a younger member in the team." And Bell was like, "Oh yeah, I feel so much older now. You know, I'm 26. I feel so old." And he's like, "Yeah, you're the old man now of the team, and I'm the young guy coming in." He's like little hints like that, saying, "Oh, I'm the new guy, and I'm the future of Red Bull," and all that stuff.
It's certainly going to be interesting for the Red Bull teams. I mean, now we've talked through the teams and how they've gone through pre-season testing. Let's talk about the upcoming challenge, which is the map that we've had on for the last 30-40 minutes or so, which is of Melbourne's Albert Park. Obviously, this track's a bit of a chaos one, where the fact that Melbourne is right near the lakes, so you've got anything being possible. Last season's qualifying showed us just how tricky conditions can get out of nowhere. Between Q3 and Q2, very little was going on. Had to delay all the sessions, it became impossible to drive, and we ended up, for only the second time in recent memory, a qualifying taking place on the same day as the race, which made things very, very tricky for the drivers and meant that the track grip changed all the time, and obviously it was difficult to see where everyone was at. Now, current reports suggest that it may possibly be wet again in Melbourne. With these new regulations, the higher torque engines and lower downforce, that's got to be the last thing that a driver wants to hear.
Well, for some drivers it could be a good thing, some drivers it could be a bad thing.
Well, the rain is in and of itself. Some drivers like driving in the rain. We know that Lewis Hamilton does. We certainly know that Jenson Button does. Fernando Alonso's been a wily old fox in the rain. But what I'm saying is, because it's the start of the season, so you've got the complete unknown. You've already got lower aerodynamics. You've already got much torquier engines that make it very easy to lose grip on the tyres. And we've also got the loss and downforce. As a driver, I imagine you'd want a very clear race where you can just get the miles in, know where you're at, and be able to react later. Reacting to the weather is the last spanner in the works you want, surely.
Well, they did get a slight bit of wet testing. It was kind of a damp track at Jerez where they went about in the intermediates for a little bit. But still, it wasn't both drivers from one team. It was just one driver from one team. So that whoever wasn't getting a shot that time, they wouldn't know what it's like to drive those cars in the wet unless they did more of the simulator testing. But we don't know.
Yeah, and of course the simulators don't tell you everything, do they? How many times have teams said, yeah, the data from the simulator's been great, and then they get on track and they take the parts straight off and say it's useless. But we've seen that so many times before, so you can't trust the simulator data. But what has to be said is that Melbourne's one of the more exciting Grand Prix, being the fusion between a closed street circuit and a closed racetrack makes grip levels difficult. Much like Canada, you can never be quite sure what's going to happen. That's my prediction. Well, we'll go to our predictions then for the race. I personally don't think you can look away from a 1-2 for the Mercedes factory team. If their form in testing has been anything to go by, they've been the most reliable and the most consistent on the pace. So if their reliability holds up, I can't see anyone but Mercedes taking 1 and 2.
Well, it'd be nice to see something else winning besides Red Bull, you know.
Oh, definitely, but I'm just saying, I expect it to be a 1-2 for Mercedes. I also expect Ferrari to spoil the Mercedes party, but it will be possible, and I reckon you've got good odds on the bookmakers for this, all 8 of the top 8 being a Mercedes manufacturer team.
Pretty much.
You certainly get good odds for that because it's something that's not happened before, and the engine certainly seems in Mercedes' favour. But Ferrari, I do think they're going to be definitely on the pace there in Melbourne. And again, despite all their testing gremlins, despite how impossible it's been for them to read the car, I just have this nagging feeling that you can't write off Red Bull and that they'll sneak out from nowhere.
I just have a feeling they could be in the points, but then it's like, they look so bad right now. But yeah, I even put this on David Croft's Twitter where I said I don't really like Red Bull that much, to be honest. but you still can't write them off. In 2009, people thought Brawn weren't going to be even able to race for Australia, but then they went and dominated it.
Yeah, exactly. And we've actually got a couple of comments courtesy of BBC Sports website from Lewis Hamilton, where he's actually saying that he thinks F1's most exciting year will be 2014. Oh, I really doubt that. There's so many classic seasons in the past. I don't think it'll be that easy. But he said, apparently, he's admitted that he got tired of watching Sebastian Vettel keep winning for Red Bull. Quote, "One team destroying it for 4 years, having your arse whooped so badly, is not good for the sport. You want a championship that goes to the wire. I hope the changes enable that to happen this year." Ouch!
Yeah, the Lotus people saying Lotus reliability a worry for all teams. Basically, Lotus believes that every single F1 team is going to be worried about reliability, especially themselves.
Yeah, so it's tricky, isn't it? And it's like, Hamilton's been saying about the perception of the sport now in this interview, because he said that he's been flying through all different airports and he's been bumping into the person from a different country, and they'll say things like, "I used to watch F1, but I don't watch it anymore," and I'll say, "This is the year you need to watch because this is such a new year. So much is changing, so it's really exciting for any fan who's currently watching or who wants to start watching." But for me, I do think that it's going to be a tighter season. One of the things with the rule reset is you don't really know where the order's going to fall. The closest that was 2009. And you go pre-2009, McLaren, Ferrari, all at the top by a long way. They fell into the midfield and further back. Brawn, from the ashes of Honda, who almost never existed, champions. Red Bull, who was not even given a hope of getting on the podium very often and scored a few fluke results. Runners-up, arguably could have been champions but for better results. So it's impossible to say really where everyone's going to be. Going back to pre-season data though, doesn't look like Mercedes have got much to worry about. If anything, they're the team that everyone's going to have to target on.
Pretty much.
Well, we will say that thank you for those of you who've watched then. This has been our first attempt at doing this. We are going to do a result reaction to Australia's Grand Prix, maybe on the Sunday, or it might actually be on the Monday, a day after the Grand Prix itself. I'm Pete Marcroft, and I've been joined today by Jordan Smith. Good afternoon to you. And we will all see you in the future. And also, I will advise that hopefully tomorrow night there will be a Tales from the Cockpit on Forza 4. Until next time, see you all.